All right, y'all. I'm live. I'm live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and I'm live on Instagram. It is your intrepid songwriter chronicling my adventures as a songwriter because seriously, who does that? Nobody does that. Now, today, I'm going to give you a production tip and I'm going to give you a business tip. So pay attention, okay? Because I'm finna save you a lot of time and I'm fixing to save you a lot of money. So the first thing I want to talk about is the production tip. And the production tip that I want to talk about today is templates. There is absolutely no way you are a producer or a beat maker and you're not working from templates. Okay? You need to be working from templates. Now, if you don't know what I mean by that, I will break it down. First of all, if you're working in a DAW, because I know everybody doesn't work with a DAW, but if you work with a DAW, a digital audio workstation, you ought to set up at least two main, well, I'll take that back, three. You ought to set up at least three main templates. You ought to have a songwriting template. You ought to have a recording template, and you ought to have a mixing template. What does a songwriting template look like? Whatever your instrument is that you write on. If you write on a keyboard, if you write on a guitar, if you start out with beats, whatever, you ought to have a template so that when you call it up in your DAW, all of the instruments that you use, if you use virtual instruments, come up with the template. They're already pre-programmed in there. Or if you record live, then it already has the setup in terms of connecting your live instrument that you're recording to the DAW. So all you have to do is hit a button and start recording. So you ought to have a songwriting template. Okay, however it is that you get your ideas, have a songwriting template. So if you're playing on live guitar and then you have a live guitar feed going into your DAW, then that input output and the mic is already set up. So you just pull it up, press a button, and you start recording. And that's what helps your flow as a songwriter, where you don't have to try to pull that stuff up and set it every time. However it is that you write. If you are a producer and you use like an external MPC or you use an external drum machine of any kind, you ought to have templates. There's no way in the world you should be a beat maker and you don't have your favorite sounds set up on their own page. Do you know how much time you're wasting if you're trying to make beats? And every time you're trying to make a new beat, you've got to pull up some stuff and set it up every time. That's ridiculous. And you should know by now that time is money. So you do not want to be wasting time because you're wasting money if you've got to set something up every time you're trying to make a beat. So whether your sound source is external, some type of drum machine, or your sound source is internal to the computer, you're using a plug-in instrument, a VST or a AAX or whatever DAW you're working on. You ought to have your favorite kicks, your favorite snares, your favorite hats, and whatever else you use loaded into templates so that when you want a certain sound, you've already got that set up. You just pull the template up and the sounds are already there. Like I use Battery a lot because I really, really like Battery. I like the sounds, but I like the ease because I like to work with a grid. If I'm working, making beats like that, I like to work with the grid so I can see what's hidden where because I'm very visual. So when I'm looking at the beat, I need to see, because sometimes there's some stuff I want to get rid of or swap out a sound, which is very easy to do with Battery. So I have several templates set up to where when I know I want to start with a certain kick or I want to achieve a certain sound, I got all that set up. Okay. So if you're a songwriter, you should have a songwriting template for your DAW that's already set up when you pull it up. And if you're a beat maker, you already ought to have your favorite sounds and your most commonly used sounds, the stuff that you use more often than not, set up so that when you get ready to write, you just pull up the template and you're ready to go. See, because when you already know what it sounds like, when you're not experimenting, when you already know what hats you're working with, when you already have your crashes or whatever you're doing, that saves you an infinite amount of time. And that's what you want. So number one is a songwriting template. Your second template ought to be a recording or your tracking template. The way you use, whatever you use to record your sounds. So if you're doing a bunch of live sounds, you need to have a template set up where the inputs and the outputs are already arranged to be routed to the mic inputs or whatever you're using to track. If you do everything in the box, same deal. You have your virtual instruments that come up and you already have them routed so they can track and be bounced to whatever stereo track you're going for. If you have to do that stuff again with every session, you are wasting time, which is costing you money. So you need to have a tracking or recording template, okay? Because you will discover as an engineer or as a producer, you will develop patterns, you will develop habits, you will develop certain things you do over and over again. You don't need to set those up every time you have a session. They need to be pre-set up, okay? They need to be pre-set up so that you can just flow as soon as you get into the session. So that's your tracking or your recording template. So number one is your songwriting template. Number two is your tracking and recording template. Your third template you should have set up for sure is your mixing template. Lord have mercy, this is so important. Because if you songwrite, track, produce, and mix, then by the time you get to the mixing stage, you ought to know what your favorite plugins are, or even if you have outboard gear, whatever, you ought to know what that gear is. You ought to know what kind of reverbs you like. You ought to know what kind of compressors you like. You ought to know if you want overhead sound or not. You ought to know what kind of EQs you like to get you the sounds that you need. So when you get to the mixing stage and you pull that mixing template up, and then there's, if you have more than one chain, like if you have something routed to where you have your main channel, but you have another chain feeding into that channel, you ought to have that set up. But most importantly, it's your mix bus. Don't make the mistake of mixing a track and then slapping on a bunch of stuff at the end. You need to be mixing through it as you're mixing so you know what it'll sound like when you get through. If you mix stuff without having that stuff set up on your mix bus, then by the time you get through and you start adding those plugins on your mix bus, your mix is not going to sound like what you thought it was going to sound like because you didn't mix through it. So you need to have that mix bus chain, the one that you know you like to use, your compressors, your verbs, your EQs, whatever. You need to have that set up on your mixing template. Now, some people have asked me, do I need a mastering template? My advice on that is no. Because if you have written a song, if you've recorded it, you produced it, and you mixed it, your ears are tired of it. You need some fresh ears. You need some fresh ears to master it. So I suggest if you've done all that, that you job that out. You let somebody else master your final mixes because you're going to get a better sound because their ears will be fresh. Okay, so that's your production tip. You need to be working with templates. You need a songwriting template. You need a tracking or a recording template. You need a mixing template at a minimum. Now, on my website, I have some free stuff, but it's Pro Tools. I only have Pro Tools stuff on there. So if you use Logic or anything else, but I've got some templates. So go to theintrepid.songwriter.com, click on free stuff, and you will see Pro Tools DAW templates. So you can at least use those as a starting point. Okay? That's your production tip. Here is your business tip. Your business tip is you need to have and know your KPI. How many of y'all know what KPI is? How many of y'all know what KPI is? Anybody looking at me live, put it in one of them chats. Do you know what KPI is? Okay, I'll tell you what KPI is. KPI is key performance indicators. Key performance indicators. And what that means is that you need to know what are the measures of your success. You can't say general stuff like, I want to be famous, I want to blow up. You ain't said nothing. Famous how? You want to be famous locally, like in your neighborhood? Do you want to be famous like in your state? Do you want to be famous regionally? Do you want to be famous nationally? Do you want to be famous internationally? You have to have some key performance indicators. You have to have something that shows you how to measure whether you're successful or not. You will never know what your success level is unless you have a way that you measure it. And it's got to be personal. So when you want to say, I want to make it rain, I want a lot of cash, you ain't said, now how much money is a lot of cash? To some people, 50 G's is a lot of money. To some people, 50 G's ain't nothing. Okay, to some people, 100 G's is a lot of money. To some people, $1 million is a lot of money. To some people, $1 million ain't nothing. So what do you mean you want to have a lot of money? So if there's a certain level of income you want to achieve, you must write that down and say, I know I'm successful when I'm pulling in X amount of money per month. Okay, and if it's a combination of sources, which it most likely will be, because the music dollar is never a whole, the music dollar is always split. Royalties, live gigs, licensing fees, whatever. But there's a specific amount of money you need to be making every month, and that's up for you. That's up to you to decide whether or not you're successful. Am I pulling in that amount of money? It must be a specific number. You can't just say I want to be rich. You can't just say I want to be big balling, because that's relative. That's different for different people. Or is your KPI a certain number of fans or followers? Do you count yourself successful if you get 20,000 streams on Spotify, 50,000 streams, 500,000 streams, 500,000? What's your key performance indicator? Okay, where you've made it, or you hit a certain level of success. When you get 10 million streams on Spotify, how do you measure it? Okay, and if you have like email lists or newsletter lists, how many people do you want on your list? How many fans do you talk to through a newsletter every week or every month? How many followers do you have on social media? How many hits do your videos get? You got to have something that lets you know when you've hit the range of success that you plan for yourself. That's a key performance indicator. Another reason that KPI is so important is because if you're not doing it, that means you're failing. That means if you're doing all these efforts, but you're not getting back the results that you want, that means what you're doing isn't working to get you to where you want to go. That's another reason KPI is so important, because you don't want to just keep doing stuff, but it's not getting you to where you want to go. So if it's not getting you to where you want to go, because you're not getting the hits that you want, because you're not getting the views that you want, because you're not getting the followers that you want, then you've got to step back and figure out another strategy that will get you to where you want to be. Otherwise, you're just going to burn up a lot of time and you won't have anything to show for it at the end. So you must set your own key performance indicators so you know when you've reached the realm or level of success that you've been striving for. And also, so you know if what you're doing isn't working, then you have to step back, reevaluate your strategy, come up with something new, and then try again until you hit that zone or hit that pocket that was the success you were looking for. Understand? All right, so today's production tip was on using templates, and today's business tip was on KPI, key performance indicators, to where you know you've made it or you know you're failing and you have to change strategies. All right, so a lot of this stuff requires more detailed explanation. So if you want that, then book a session with me. Go to my website, theintrepid.songwriter.com, and click on Hire Me. And when you click on Hire Me, you can book a session, and you can book a session in 30-minute increments up to 2 hours. So if you need a specialized, detailed plan to map out from where you are to where you want to be, that's what we can do in these sessions. I also have something called Music Money Maximizer. Music Money Maximizer. And that's when I go through every registration you need to do to be sure you're getting all of your money. Okay? But if you have any other consulting questions, contracts, royalties, copyright, we can talk about that too. So go to my website, theintrepid.songwriter.com, and click on Hire Me. And when you click on Hire Me, then you can book a session if you need more specialized one-on-one attention to go over these topics in detail and figure out how to apply them to your career in particular. All right, that's it for this week. Remember that I go live every Friday at noon. Every Friday at noon, I go live and I give you a production tip and I give you a business tip to help make your career better. Okay, because the reason I do this is because I'm letting you know the stuff I wish people had told me when I first started out. All right, that's it for this week. I'll see you next Friday. Have a great weekend. The Trappist Songwriter, out.